With the upcoming HBO reboot of Harry Potter, we're once again confronted with a difficult question. Can we separate the art from the artist? Because two things can be true at the same time. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is an important part of film history, and JK Rowling is a transphobe. That tension is what I want to examine today. In this case, the tension exists because of JK Rowling's rhetoric. I want to be absolutely clear about one thing. I believe Rowling's views are harmful and wrong. Trans people deserve dignity, safety, and equal participation in society. Nothing in this video should be interpreted as defending her views. The question I want to explore instead is whether rejecting those views necessarily requires rejecting the work itself. Some people believe so, and others unequivocally say they can separate the art from the artist. And to be honest, my views on this are not fully formed because of how complex of a question it is. I personally find it difficult to dissociate Harry Potter from my own life. It played a huge role in my childhood. My brother was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 3 and fought the disease for 8 years before he died. During those years, when he was often bedridden, the Harry Potter movies became an escape for both of us, right at the height of the franchise's popularity. Sitting in front of the TV as John Williams' score began, we could forget, at least for a moment, that he was dying. I've always been saddened that he never got to see the end of the series. He died before the 4th film was released, just as the story itself began to turn darker. That shift mirrored my own life in ways I still feel today. That emotional connection with this piece of media exists independently of the author's personal beliefs. The comfort it provided belongs to my experience, not to JK Rowling's later statements. That emotional connection makes the question much harder to answer in practice because while I sometimes feel capable of separating art from the artist, there are other cases where I find it difficult. For example, when it comes to Michael Jackson, I believe the testimonies Wade Robson and Jane Safechuck shared in Leaving Neverland. I find the documentary and their involvement credible, and what they allege is deeply disturbing. And since watching the documentary, I've felt a real discomfort listening to Michael Jackson's music, and it makes me understand why some people feel repulsed by media created or performed by morally compromised figures. But I also still like some of his music. In other words, I can hold two truths at once. Michael Jackson was a bad person, and he made good music. On the merit, it is impossible to deny his impact on pop music from Thriller to Scream. But every time his music plays, I can't stop thinking about the credible allegations against him. Reflecting on this, I realize I personally find it harder to dissociate music specifically from the artist. When Michael Jackson sings, the art and the artist feel inseparable. The performance is the person. But cinema feels different, doesn't it? In film, the creator is often one step removed from the work itself, which makes me think the nature of the media matters in this debate. Think of Alfred Hitchcock's influence on cinema. Psycho fundamentally reshaped the thriller genre. Rope included coded gay subtext at a time when it was forbidden by US censors. Films like Rear Window have been referenced, reworked, and outright copied for decades, and contemporary directors still cite Hitchcock as a foundational influence. And yet, in her book, actress Tippi Hedren, who starred in The Birds, accused him of SA after refusing his advances. That's deeply disturbing, and it's a serious stain on his legacy. But it's also true that his work remains widely discussed because of its lasting influence on cinema. I often rewatch Rear Window, and I will never stop being in awe of his eye for cinema. In this instance, I am able to dissociate his art from his personal behavior. Maybe it's because Hitchcock is behind the camera and not directly delivering his art to me like Michael Jackson does. Or maybe it's because I cannot resist enjoying Grace Kelly's mesmerizing performance. I think my uneven level of discomfort has something to do with the nature of film as a collaborative art form. Like I said, music is harder for me to dissociate, but a film like Harry Potter is not the expression of a single person, much like Rear Window does not only showcase Hitchcock's artistic talents. Is The Philosopher's Stone a JK Rowling movie or a Columbus movie? What about John Williams' score, the actors, the production designers, the visual effects team? At this point, the Harry Potter films represent a massive collaborative effort and arguably a showcase of British film excellence, from largely British casts and crews to the studios, craftspeople, and technical talent that brought the world to life. Reducing these films solely to their original author erases the work of countless artists whose contributions from cinematography and music to world building and visual storytelling are themselves worth discussing and analyzing as part of film history. And also, crucially, those films do not reflect JK Rowling's views on trans people. If they did, we'd be having a different conversation. I also think there is a difference between engaging with a work of fiction and sanitizing a real person's life in the media. For example, the upcoming Michael Jackson biopic is reportedly avoiding the allegations against him entirely, focusing only on his rise as a pop icon. I find this objectionable because a biopic is explicitly about a person's life, and erasing that controversy distorts the truth. If a film were made about JK Rowling's life, it would be equally dishonest to ignore her transphobia. See what I'm saying? Now, I want to engage honestly with the strongest version of the argument I hear most often: money. Many people argue that we should not talk about or watch Harry Potter at all because it makes JK Rowling money. That financial benefit is often treated as a form of endorsing all of her views. I understand where that concern comes from because money talks, right? But if profit equals endorsement, then that principle would force us to boycott far more art than we actually do. Consider Harvey Weinstein. The films he produced are still widely discussed within film culture, despite what we now know about him. Movies like Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill remain widely watched, discussed, and analyzed. Weinstein no longer profits from those films. His company went bankrupt and the rights are now held by other entities. Is that why we can discuss those movies today? Or is it because of their lasting cultural impact on cinema? Kill Bill would still be the same film regardless of who profits from it, and I believe it would still be discussed for its artistic merits, even if Weinstein profited from it. To be clear, I am not comparing the severity of Weinstein's crimes to JK Rowling's views. I'm just examining whether financial benefit alone can determine whether art remains open to discussion and consumption. If the answer is that profit alone determines whether art can be discussed, then that logic has to hold consistently. Michael Jackson's music is still played in public all the time. Is it acceptable only because he is dead and no longer profits from it? What about Kanye West? Do we have to wait for him to die or sell the rights to his music before My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy becomes acceptable to engage with again? Or take Danny D. Kane. The band members did nothing wrong, yet Diddy likely still profits from their music. Should that work be off limits too? Did people stop listening to the Beatles in 2005 when Michael Jackson was accused in court? After all, MJ owned part of their catalog and profited from their music. So, when followed through consistently, it's clear that money alone cannot function as the ultimate moral metric for whether art can be discussed or engaged with. It feels different than, say, boycotting Amazon because the output is art, and art evokes emotion, good or bad, that are meant to be criticized and engaged with. But the financial argument is only one part of the debate. Even if we set money aside, another question remains: how should we evaluate the art itself? When art is created and put out there for consumption, it feels okay to engage with it and evaluate it on its merit. But the feedback from the audience may very well be influenced by the artists who created the art, especially if their views seep through their work. The real question then is not whether the artist is morally flawed, history shows that many of them are, but whether engaging with their work necessarily means endorsing them. I can't imagine anyone complaining about the Corridor Crew reacting to Harry Potter's CGI because of JK Rowling's bigoted views. It feels like a legitimate way to engage with the movies, right? Which brings me to discussing the HBO reboot. If the upcoming HBO reboot were to turn Harry Potter into an anti-trans propaganda piece, I would obviously be strongly against it. But that is not what this project appears to be. What is of interest to me instead is how a new generation of creatives will reimagine one of the most culturally significant media franchises of its time, one that has left an undeniable mark on a whole generation of moviegoers and filmmakers. For years, way before any JK Rowling scandals, fans of the books criticized the original film for how much they had to condense and omit. A television format changes that equation entirely. With time on its side, the series offers an opportunity to explore the world, themes, and characters with greater depth, which was a major source of disappointment as the books got thicker and movies had to condense more material. I feel like watching a new generation of artists revisit and reshapes this material is in itself worth discussing, despite JK Rowling. I also feel that it's equally important to call out JK Rowling for her hateful rhetoric towards our community, especially because of the immense platform she has. In no way should the success of Harry Potter, past or present, should allow her to spew hate with no pushback, and I think the anger coming at her is justified. But is analyzing, critiquing, or contextualizing a piece of media truly the same as endorsing its creator? Say I watched the Melania documentary, produced by Brett Ratner and distributed by Amazon, all entities I consider problematic in different ways, not to mention the shady nature of the deal between Bezos and the Trump family. Say I watched the documentary and made a critical review of the film on this channel. That would seem perfectly legitimate, right? But what if I liked it? Would that change the legitimacy of my review? Like, what if I thought the film was well-constructed, compelling, or artistically effective, and I said so? Would that suddenly become morally wrong because of who the subject is and who made it? In other words, is it possible to analyze, criticize, contextualize, and even appreciate a piece of media without moral endorsement of its creator? Do you see what I'm saying? What if the Harry Potter series on HBO turns out to be legitimately good TV, like Game of Thrones Season 3 good? Would it be okay to acknowledge it's good despite JK Rowling's views on trans people? Would it be more acceptable to talk about the HBO reboot if I thought the series was not good? Like, if I trashed the series, would that be more acceptable? These two scenarios are possible, and in both cases, I would still strongly oppose JK Rowling's views on trans people. It doesn't matter if the show is good or bad, I would still oppose her views on trans people. Assessing the merit of a piece of media can be detached from my views of the author's personal opinion. I like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and JK Rowling is still a transphobe. I don't like Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and JK Rowling is still a transphobe. Maybe part of the answer lies in something Daniel Radcliffe said when responding to Rowling's comments. He wrote that if these stories meant something to you, then that is between you and the book that you read, and it's sacred. In other words, once art enters the world, it no longer belongs entirely to its creator. It becomes part of the culture. It's interpreted and reinterpreted by millions of people. And when I think back to watching those movies with my brother while he was fighting cancer, that experience belongs to me, not to JK Rowling, not to anyone else. To be honest though, I still don't know that my opinion on this topic is fully formed and developed yet. But I'm curious to know what you think. If you think Harry Potter should not be discussed at all, I'm genuinely interested in hearing why, and in understanding how that position differs from how we continue to engage with works of art from other controversial people. And also, what about the books? It feels different, right? Or is it?